Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good day, good weekend, good whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to episode number 3 of Skill Issues. I'm Jeannie, your host, joined on not the desk, but on the screen with Pavlos and Hazza. Pavlos, why are you smiling already? Like, I haven't even said a joke yet. Why are you already laughing, bro?
It's always a good time when I'm on broadcast with you guys, even if it's a podcast, even if it's a broadcast itself. I love it.
I thought you were going to say it was always a good time when I'm on the broadcast and there was just going to be a full stop and you were just like tooting your own horn, but horn, sorry.
Someone clip that. Already a great start.
All right, Hazza, please save me, jump in here.
I'm surprised it's not me involved with one of these innuendos again. Yeah, no, it's good to be here, man. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still getting used to Pavlos' new haircut. Like, I saw him pop on the screen again, and I was like, it's been another week still. But yeah, man. It's good. It's good to be back. I wish that I had my proper camera because I look like a thumb with this one. But it's all good.
Just with this one, right? Like you regularly don't look like a thumb. Right? It's just the camera's fault. It's not the face, the construction that's going on. It's not okay. Well,
nah, Hazza hasn't left his apartment for like 3 years.
Literally,
no, so true.
The sun has never touched his skin.
Real gamer moment right there. Well, I'm really happy that you bring up Hazza not leaving his room because I have facts, okay? I have cold, hard proof that Hazza not only left his room, but this guy had the balls to get into a cab, get onto a plane, and go to a different country. He's crossing international country lines.
I am. It's true, and I have a photo to prove it, which I 100% took myself. Here, I went to Warsaw. It's interesting you think that I took a cab to the airport because I have you know that where I live, that's a very expensive way of traveling that kind of distance. So no, got on the coach, the good old National Express, the good old NatX. Flew out to Warsaw, had a really nice time. It was very cold, so you were correct, sort of half. I didn't get any sun on my skin because it was freezing.
What the?
I met up with the Val League East people, and they tied me up. They tied me up.
What?
They held me there with the Polish scarf. The Polaris flag got put in the bin because they want Kayak, right? Their young star who's going to be debuting next week. It's only 8 days now until we see Polaris kick off again, or 9 days, something along those lines. But other than this sort of small hiccup, it was nice to see everyone. It was a good time.
For free? You let them do that to you for free? Like,
it was a crossover event. It's like multiverse, you know?
Nah,
you know
if this
how,
is what the crossover
Doctor
events are going to be
Strange-
looking like, I ain't participating in it.
You got the
Understandable.
reply there, and then there's a quote retweet as well.
Right, okay.
I mean, listen, like, I don't
Why
blame
is the
him.
Polaris flag in the bin?
Why not? Because Polaris this year is in the bin. Ooh.
That's not very nice.
Ginny coming out with the hot takes. We're like 5 minutes in. Oopsie poopsie. But you know what? Speaking of in the bin, I'm gonna have to say it. Karmine Corp, so far in the LEC have been in the bin. They've not had the greatest of performances, and I think the thing when we were looking at Karmine Corp and looking at the roster when they joined the LEC, there was a lot of expectations. I personally put them in like the top 2. Like I was G2's number 1, and then top 2 was probably shared between Fnatic and Karmine Corp, just because of the sheer dominance that this team had in the regional league. So EMEA Masters, which when you're looking at Valorant is identical to Ascension, you're looking at Karmine Corp, and they had won it 4 times. They have 4 titles under their belt, and then they come into 2024 with a spot in the LEC, and it has been absolutely electric. The vibe that the fans have been able as well to bring to the LEC, the vibe is just when you turn on the stream when KC is playing, bro, it's like tuning into a football match, and love it or hate it, I don't really care, but I love it because I think it's just bringing a lot of energy, a lot of hype, and it's forcing all the other teams as well to come out and make memes. But this is exactly what I want to talk about. If you play League of Legends, if you tune into League of Legends, or if you don't, this is genuinely a physical representation of the match between Karmine Corp and Vitality. Karmine Corp had an incredible draft. Dare I say they won the draft. Like, Yamato, he gave them the best of the best options that they could work with. But the way that both of these teams then went on and approached this match is insane. It felt like watching a solo queue game to a certain extent. You can even see, like, there were clips of Cage Rule where he literally started speaking German because I didn't even know that he spoke German. Like, that's number one. But like number two, like the gameplay and the style and the decision making and the macro that we've seen from the players in that particular game was probably the absolute lowest of the low. Definitely even of this entire season, dare I say, for like the last couple of years. It's concerning. It brings a lot of questions in terms of like how Karmine Corp is going to be progressing. But I also want to emphasize this and say that they are new to the LEC. There is a lot of differences between the LEC and your regional league. Like on the LFL, yes, you have LANs, but it's not the same atmosphere. It's not like you're going onto a LAN 3 days a week out of your 7 days. On top of cracking, on top of the fact that you're now living in Berlin, you're not even staying in your own home. There's a lot of changes for these players, and unfortunately for them, they haven't really found how to fit together yet. But that is a little concerning because when you're looking at the standings, would you like to point that out for me, Pavlos? Like, what's the team number 10?
I'm trying to squint my eyes here, but it looks like they're 0-5.
Yeah, 0-5. They're changing the name to Owen Core. 0-5. But I think we've seen this movie before, though. It feels like, Pavlos, maybe if you want to chime in a little bit on how Karmine Corp did in Valorant last year.
Well, I was going to first say that is it mostly is the disappointment here mostly because there's always going to be a team that underperforms, right? Whether if it wasn't Karmine Corp, it might have been Rogue, it might have been Fnatic, it might have been any team, right? Any team can be in that situation. Fnatic is known for their slow starts in the LEC and stuff. Do you think the biggest reason why there's a lot of disappointment with Karmine Corp going 0-5 was it because they actually won EMEA Masters so many times?
Yes, I also think that, again, looking at some of their players like Sakan, who had already performed in the LEC, is also, again, bringing question of, okay, he was in the LEC, he went back to EMEA Masters, won the title, came back. What's happening here? And I think the biggest disappointment comes from the fact that they actually started off really, really well. Their first games were against Fnatic. They were against G2. And it wasn't games where Karmine Corp just like flat out went into the game and lost. Like Karmine Corp put forward such an incredible early game performance. Like individually, the lanes did really well. They worked really well together on executing some of these ganks that they had set up with their jungler. It was really beautiful to see a team coming through from EMEA Masters, from the regional league, competing on that tier 1 stage where everything is just so much more competitive, so much more thought out, so much more strategic. Yes, there were shortcomings, but I'm talking about shortcomings against G2, against Fnatic, teams that went to Worlds time and time again. Fnatic even getting their international trophy. Like, they're going up against veterans, and they've done such a good job. And then obviously they're not able to close out the game. But I think the game against Vitality is really what brought that disappointment, because we've seen beautiful gameplay from them. And then unfortunately, it comes to this last game that you're playing, and you're playing it against another French team, and it's just like, oh, it was rough. It hurt. It really hurt to watch. Like, that was a solo queue game. I look at the game and I'm like, ooh. Every player was just, I think, a little tilted, if I'm being completely honest. And
do they come back from this? Do they bounce back here, Ginny? Or do they just throw away the roster? Is that it?
No. Like, you need time for a roster to, like, obviously, like, work well together and gel well together. Yeah. Obviously, something is going wrong. They have incredible coaching staff behind them, so I know that KC is going to be one of those teams that can figure out what is going wrong, and it's just a matter of being on the same page. It generally at the moment doesn't feel like they are on the same page, because Yamato, particularly as a coach, he always would like preach on about when you're playing as a team, you're playing on one screen. That's what you want from your team. You want your team to everybody just be playing the exact same game. One team, one screen. As in, like, you're all looking at the game from the exact same perspective. And that's like his philosophy in coaching this, and philosophy in how he's approached and how he's had so much success. But then you're looking at Karmine Corp, and that's exactly what they don't have. They make individual plays, but it doesn't feel very coherent. And as a result, it kind of falls apart because you're going up against teams who have that experience of playing together on one screen. I mean, G2's being re-signed. Like, this team played together all year last year, and now they're playing together all year this year. So I think this week particularly for Karmine Corp, like, this is generally like do or die. I think realistically they're not going to be in playoffs anyway. 0-5. They need to win every single game leading up to this, or otherwise, yeah, it's rough. But I also think like it's a wake up call in terms of like what they need to work on. But special.
The overreaction here is Karmine Corp leaves the LEC for being too bad.
Whoa, whoa. I mean, listen, their fans, the Karmine Corp fans, they're still with them. Like, they are so supportive. I've seen them on Twitter. They're like, guys, just trust yourself, like we trust you, and it will work out. So I'm really looking forward to next week, particularly. I want to see them perform. I want to see them get the fucking win on the board, okay? Like, they have to. I'm a believer. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I hope that it gets a little bit better, because it is really sad to see a lot of potential in this roster that's currently not being showcased. So new week, new team, I guess, in terms of their performances. We'll wait how that goes. But also new year, new colors. Not for KC though, but Hazza. There was something that we saw that we weren't very happy with.
Yes. Are we talking about the
Valorant VCT?
Yeah, the new VCT colors. This is an interesting one. I don't know how people feel about this. For me, I don't really care. Not in like a negative way, but like I think that the new colors, they look good. I have nothing really too negative to say about them. I think like red was cool before, but we're expanding now. You need a little bit of variation. I think they pair together pretty well. And yeah, look, it's a new identity for how the leagues are going. I think they need to be a little bit more specific. So it's nice to see that EMEA has a bit more identity, I suppose.
It's giving
I'm a fan
hope.
of these changes. I'm actually a big fan of these changes. Sorry, Jenny. Because I felt like all of the leagues had their own graphics package. All of them were red and black. It was very dark. It was very red. And I don't think there was a clear distinction between all of them, apart from the Americas broadcast, right? I felt like they had a lot of creativity to have different colors, different types of graphics. And that's something I don't think Pacific and EMEA had. But now giving each group their own colors, I feel like they can, make their own identity. And I sort of like that. For Pacific, it ties in with their logo. It makes, there's an ocean color theme going on for them. I'm not quite sure where the yellow and gray stands for EMEA. I feel like that's a difficult color to integrate and show off a lot of the time, and might get a bit tiring to the eyes after a while. But the general premise of each league having its own sort of color identity, I like.
Mom, I thought I was seeing purple and green. What do you mean yellow and gray?
I was just about to say, yeah, this is a big thing that people have been talking about. Is it yellow or is it green? For me,
it's highlighter yellow. No?
Yeah, it's green. It is green.
It's highlighter yellow.
Please
tell me this is
no.
purple black.
If you look on the RGB code, it's 99% green.
That's purple and green. That is not yellow and.
That's yellow and gray.
Are you?
I'm not colorblind.
You're literally you're
colorblind.
I
am not. That is
I
yellow.
was going to say,
and
to be
green.
fair, another point as well. It does look like a colorblind friendly sort of like rendition. You know how when you change the colorblind settings on the game to increase the contrast in the players so that you can actually see them? That's what it looks like.
Nah, you're actually colorblind.
Is it this gold or blue dress thing all over again, but for like?
Nah, you know what?
It's the visual.
We're changing.
What does the logo look for you guys? Right? Go to
link.
Singer, could you show in the previous link that you showed that only had VCT EMEA?
Can we change the title of the podcast to "Diagnosing Casters
Look,
with Colorblindness"?
That's yellow, right? Stop it at the first screen. Stop it. Okay, that's purple. That's definitely purple. You're right. But
that's green.
That's highlighted yellow. Come on.
Green. That's great. Bro.
Please tell me there's someone in chat that
get
agrees.
your eyes
Please.
checked out, bestie. I think you just.
Okay.
Man.
Nah, you're colorblind.
Yeah,
well,
I think
congratulations. Or
the right is purple. I see
you're
it now.
special.
There was some screens. Okay.
I agree with what you guys were
Special
saying
needs.
though about like in terms of identity for the regions. I think it's just about building on what was already done, because like America's had some cool intro opener stuff to their league. I don't know if you saw, they had like the players in these locations with like a desert and mountains and stuff, and it looked kind of like weird, but it reminded me a lot of like the traditional sports openers that you'd see where they would like mess around with the players. And I think tying the players to the branding always does a really good job at sort of building that up as well. And in terms of Pacific, I know that you said, Pavlos, maybe you didn't think Pacific had done as much last year. I think it was quite cool that they had like an anthem. They had an actual song that someone went and sung.
I love their songs.
They had a few different things like that. To be honest, EMEA was trailing behind in terms of its identity, I think, in comparison to some of these other regions. When you also look at how diverse the cultures are within EMEA is, and how blessed we are to have all of these countries here.
Bless,
the
my
Colosseum
guy.
was cool. No Colosseum anymore.
No, the new studio is sick.
The new studio is sick though, and we spoke about that last week. So I'm trying to think about the on-screen. We had like that weird red splooge that came up, like as the transitions. You remember that? You remember like how the weird yeah. I'm looking forward to the new branding.
I love how you just went, you were like mid-sentence and you just go, yeah.
Oh, shout out to Cato Big Lemons in chat. Actually finding the ASCII code for the color, and it's actually called lime yellow.
Wait, Cato, are you doing
lime
okay?
Yellow though, but you know what a lime is though, right? A green fruit.
But you know what yellow is, right?
Color.
You know what, guys?
Color.
What you know what we're gonna do? Whenever you're both in Berlin, okay, you're gonna go into a fist fight where Pavlos stands for yellow and Hazza stands for green, and whoever wins the fist fight wins.
Honestly, I'm looking at chat here as well. Not only is it me versus Pavlos, the bloody Greek god, I'm seeing Casso, Big Lemons, and Jeb also in chat saying that it's purple and yellow. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not winning a fight against either of you three, let alone all of you. So I'm quite happy to tap out on this one.
My guy cosplaying Fiddlesticks IRL. Let's get it. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's not the only thing that fortunately, actually, because I know you guys do love Valorant, that's not the only thing that we're going to be talking about this week when it comes to Valorant. I think another thing that has like blown up on my feed and people are like, what the heck is going on? Is this really smart individual coming out with a statement that that the current amount of games that are being played are enough. And it's a little bit concerning because looking at the very low amount of games, Pavlos, it doesn't feel like there's a possibility to build that identity that we spoke about when it comes to these colors looking to build an identity. When you're not looking at a team playing often enough, how are they going to build their identity? How are you going to be able to relate to that identity as a viewer? How can you get on the same, wavelength, get that relationship between fan and athlete, fan and team going?
Yeah. My initial reaction, hearing out on the announcement of the number of games played out per season, initially I was a bit shocked. I was expecting something more, and having a little bit more time to think about it, I realized that my thoughts were, that's some Stream Deck keys.
Panel, yeah.
Shout out to Singer producing today. So my initial thoughts were a little bit on the negative side. I thought that the games weren't too many. I expected we'd have 2 splits, so I expected the double the amount of regular season games than we had last year.
All right.
But now looking things all across the board and having seen a couple opinions that sort of changed my mind, my premature mind, I think, because I form my opinion a little bit on emotion rather than actual common sense. It makes sense given that we've got 11 teams participating in each league, so the format would have been weird anyway. And also considering that we had lock-in last year taking up a lot of the time, and that's not completely gone, right? Because we've also got another third international event in. It's not as if we're filling in lost time. It feels they're trying to find more games. They're trying to push more games, or at least the same amount of games in the same amount of time. So increasing the games will increase the intensity of those splits. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation for Riot and how they stabilize it. Now, would I have loved to see more Valorant? Sure. But it also is a very difficult task to try and fit in more games.
Yeah, I think especially as well with having game changers, having Ascension, having VCT, then having 3 international events, it is going to be a little bit more difficult in terms of getting a certain team that potentially isn't performing very well to play a certain amount of games. But I also, again, think that only having like going into a season as a team, right? Making all these investments, players, whatever, and then knowing like there is the chance that you're only gonna be playing 12 games. Bro, that's a feels bad, man. Like it is a feels bad, man. But I can also understand it from the scheduling perspective, where there's just so much going on that getting it all to fit into one cute little wrapped bowed package is also going to be a lot more difficult. So it's about finding that common ground. And I do think something that Valorant has been doing really well is actually listening to feedback from the community. We've seen that definitely this year when it comes to tier 2 and how some of the changes have been made. So I am hopeful for the future, but I do think, again, like this 2023 year, we just got to wait and see how it unfolds rather than getting onto our Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and being angry.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a bit of a weird one, right? Because I think the main thing that caught me a little bit off guard is the fact that for the regular season, they're not doing round robin. So there is a fairly decent chance that if you think of two teams in your head, okay, I would love to see these guys play against each other. Yeah. That match will not be happening in the regular season until playoffs if both of them end up qualifying. So I think we shouldn't necessarily feel that are huge, highbrow, massive value matchups like, you know, in EMEA, for example, your Fnatic versus Na'Vi or Liquid or any of those names won't be playing each other, because you can put a little bit of faith in the fact that that clash will come later down the line. And if you've seen Sideshow's video on it and what he's spoken about, you have this problem where there are different bands of teams. You have teams who end up playing the sort of minimum amount of matches because they crash out in the regular season. There's no LCQ anymore, and they're not going to be making deep runs. You have this other band of teams which sort of played LCQ, did okay, and then the deep Masters runs, the ones at every international event. And that's when you start to see rosters that are getting completely overworked. If you contrast that to Counter-Strike, for example, where teams are playing like, and like this was crazy as well when I'm prepping for these teams. I'm looking at HLTV and they're waking up and going to their facility at like 10 in the morning. There's a decent chance that when I come to cast a midday match, they've already played a best of 3 before that point in time, and they've got one more coming up before the day is done. That is just standard procedure. And quite frankly, the bones in which the ecosystem is built on, Valorant, of course, very different. And I guess that's the difference between your tier 1 and your tier 2. How many games do you want them to be playing? I think fatigue is definitely going to be an issue and something that we see talked about this year with the amount of games we already have. Is there a way that we can sort of distinguish between the top end and the bottom end in terms of how many matches they're actually playing?
I feel they're making it into a more difficult task because the problem with Riot Esports is that they don't want to be into competition with themselves, right? You've got two major esports products. You've got Valorant and League of Legends, which you want both to have high attention whenever they're on. So you don't really want to have broadcasts from Valorant and League of Legends running concurrently. And I think that forms a problem in their scheduling, because then they have to limit their schedule to certain parts of the year, certain parts of the calendar, to particular esports. So there may be an optimal way to run Valorant and have it run throughout the year. The workload will be less because the games would be more spread out. But that would conflict with League of Legends schedule, because when Valorant reaches its peak, then the League of Legends season reaches its peak. So when the massive global events from both esports, Worlds and Champions, for example, would want to fall into the same month, for example, if you wanted to run an optimal year, which is something that Riot is not willing to do. If you look at the sports, right, there's football, there's basketball. You might be a fan of both. You might want to watch both, but there's always going to be some sort of conflict when the major games are played out. That's just fact. Yes, okay, you might not want to play EuroLeague when Champions League is going on, but that is going to happen. And I feel the fact that Riot Games is in control of both of these products and wants to have its cake and eat it too, that's an inherent problem in and of itself.
That's exactly what like the European matches are like you said, Pavlos. Sorry to cut you off there, Jenny, but it's just like, you know, you think about how you have like a championship game, which would basically be like challenges going on the same time that you have loads of, you know, huge events going on. I think you want in the early life cycle ways for things to be cross-promoted. I don't think challenges got as much of a signal boost as it probably would have liked last time around. They flirted with ideas of having it introduced to the main broadcast, but the main point that I'm trying to get at is, I think there's this really weird difference also, and this is something else that the Eggman spoke about, was people who like follow one team or people who like want to follow loads of teams and stuff that's going on. Because in traditional sport, and I think this again is just showing the gap that there is in terms of what fan culture is even like in esport. If you follow your one team, they're going to play one game a week and you'll turn up for it and you'll watch it. And that's actually what's going to be happening in Valorant this year, except there perhaps just isn't enough weeks to put all of those games in. If you were to tighten up the calendar a little bit more, then you've also got to be thinking about everyone getting hired on the back end, casters, etc., how much they have to be working within the week to actually facilitate the schedule that you have. Do you then make a bigger broadcast team? Maybe, but does that then end up incurring additional costs and things on top of that? So I think where esports is currently in the old winter and that, probably not.
Yeah, I think as well something that you touched upon earlier was like fatigue, and I think we've seen that between in League of Legends specifically, between like the LEC, the LCS, as well as the LCK and the LPL. So these regions have like very different formats. When we're looking at the LCS, you have regular season, BO1s every day. You play one BO1, 5 BO1s a day, so that all 10 teams can participate. And then you need to have like 4 wins to qualify for playoffs. Season is like 6 weeks long, break. Then you go into spring, then you go into MSI, then you go into summer, and then you have Worlds. Now, that's one way how it's run. And then the second way, you have like LCK and LPL, who, when we're looking at the LPL, by the way, Thursday, Friday, 2 best of 3s. Saturday, Sunday, 3 best of 3s. So these teams are playing a best of 3 format. They're getting so much more practice in, so many more maps, so many more games. As a result, so much more of that ability to scrim each other. Are they fatigued every now and then? Yes, of course. But also, it's a lot more forgiving, the format. So when we're like literally said by players on broadcast during interviews on the LEC, the format is not very forgiving. If you make a mistake within the first 2-3 games, you're literally outie. Like, your chances of going to playoffs and like playing all the 6 weeks of the split is probably not going to be there. So as a result, teams are too scared to innovate. And as a result as well, like, they're not going to, push themselves as further. But when you're looking at other formats like the LCK and the LPL, where they have so many games, teams are willing to innovate, teams are willing to play, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of reports of players just being exhausted, players being tired. Like, a lot of the players have suffer from like carpal tunnel, and they just have to like, there is like a lot of difficulties with balancing your personal life and your esports 3BO3s a day kind of life. So yeah, I think it is a really fine line, and it's really difficult, as you said it as well, Pavlos. Not just the fatigue plays into it and like the creativity and allowing teams to actually play a certain amount of games, but as you said it as well, like, they have League of Legends that they don't want to compete with, and then you have Valorant. It's why these games are on different days, at least for us in EMEA. In NA, I don't know if I'm leaking anything, actually. We'll see. Whatever. But like in NA, the LCS is now back on the weekends. Where does that put Valorant? Where for Americas? Is it going to be on the weekends too? Like, they did say actually that. No, Mark said it. It's going to be on the same. Yeah, I'm not leaking anything. It's going to be on the same day. Like, they're going to be on the same day, same studio, same everything. So, because at the end of the day, you want to grow your esports as sustainably and as long and as big as possible. And that's just the forefront. Their mission is growing that esports, and it's also just going to be a learning curve. Like, how many TOs can we say run 2 of the biggest esports?
Yeah, you can't say that much, can you? And I don't think it's a matter of only having 2 different products. It's a matter of also having different sub-products, right? So like, yes, there's VCT MEA, but then there's the game changers scene, right? And when trying to bring up great transition there, Singer. When coming to game changers, Mel had something to say about how it's all scheduled this year. Coming in a little bit too early, you might have some disadvantages when you're playing in the T2 bracket, also known as the Challengers, the Challenger Leagues, because there's already pre-existing knowledge of your play structure, because people have been able to watch the VODs of the Game Changers leagues. So it's not only a massive scheduling palaver, but it's also a fair play scenario if you want to give fair opportunities and equal opportunities to all of the tournaments. How on earth is that ever going to be working out? You're always going to miss out on something. You're never going to be perfect with a schedule like this.
Yeah,
It's rough.
It's a tough one, man. I think as well, like this whole conversation
That's a long
about
tweet.
playing in these qualifiers and having VODs and stuff is like such a huge thing. We had it with Azure in the Polaris qualifier recently. Like all the other teams wanted their games broadcasted, but they were one of the few exceptions because they've got game changers coming up, and you know something's got to give somewhere. You have to make the decision for one or the other. But to spin it onto a more positive note. I don't know if you guys saw actually, but Team Liquid Brazil, their Game Changers team, led by Daiki, has qualified for the closed qualifier of Brazilian Challengers. So they are, I think, like 3 or 4 best of 3s away from qualifying for the second tier of competition there and playing in that league. So that's really cool. I guess again, it's what's the relationship between the two parts of the ecosystem? Because for me, I don't think that like Game Changers and Challengers should really be competing with those spots, but at the same time, it's like the people that want to watch those will watch those, and the people that want to watch certain leagues will watch them. As long as there isn't a direct clash, there should be a way for that to sort of work itself out. I don't know. It's a difficult one.
Yeah, I think in general, like esports and getting the timings right, getting the prize pool right, getting the season right, there's always going to be like some difficulties and some issues, and there's always going to be changes. Like I'm not gonna sweep anything under the rug and say that the economy is doing great and so is esports, because it's obviously not. And as much as like I just want to say that the best is being tried here, and at the end of the day, you live and you learn, and all these changes that are happening are coming with positive and negative impacts on the teams, on the players, on the schedule, on the community, and it's just a matter of weighing them up and seeing how this moves into 2025. Like it's not like, oh, this is the last year that we're going to see Valorant. Like Valorant's always going to be around. It's always going to be evolving. It's happened with League. It's going to happen with Valorant. Like the LEC changed formats last year. They're doing some change. They did some changes again this year. Like advice, feedback, everything's been taken on and it will be implemented. I think it's just a matter of waiting to see when and how and what exactly is going to be implemented. But I think to keep in mind as well is we don't live in perfect society. We definitely don't live in perfect times, because not only is Valorant with some of these changes, like to an extent, being impacted in terms of the teams playing, and I don't know how it's going to impact sponsorships. That's not really my expertise. But I also want to look at Rocket League particularly, because that is also another esports that has had changes to its calendar. And the changes to the calendar for Rocket League have been quite substantial. It again brings the question of how many games are teams actually going to be playing, and how is that going to work out for the teams? How much, like, I don't want to say how much money is there for grabs, but also like how much income is it to possibly make out of a game like Rocket League? And I'm not just talking about it from like a player perspective. I'm also going to be talking about it from like, I also want us to talk about it from like a talent perspective. I think talent as well in these conversations is always kind of like pushed a little bit to the back, because we are seen as fortunate. And I will be the last person on planet Earth to say that we don't have an amazing job, and that we are not some of the luckiest people on the planet to have the chance to make a living off of appearing on a camera to talk about something that we love and that we care about. But I also, with these changes that come in, talent is also affected, because there's lesser days, which means lesser people to be hired, less money to be made for the people who do get hired. And then again, it brings the question of, is it sustainable to only work in one esport? And when the answer to that question then becomes no, for talent, it's also like, for talent is actually easy, because unlike players, we could just be like, okay, it's not easy. We can't make money off of one esports. We're going to learn a different game, but we don't have to learn it to the point where we're like the top rank, dedicating like 10 hours a day to prac.
Unless your job is an analyst.
Unless your job is an analyst. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to pick up a different game and I'm going to do both. And we have that. We are fortunate enough to do so. But I do think as well, again, like that will then kind of negatively impact potentially sometimes for some people the way that they view not game number 2 or game number 3, because you have to put in the work to be able to do that. Trust me, been there, done that. And I will continue doing that. But yeah, Rocket League, if we could, I'm not sure if we have any tweets on that, but again, the reduced prize pool, the reduced day rates, the reduced days to play reduces the income for talent as well. And also for players, I think, especially Rocket League as a community, their player base, it's so young. These are like super young children, dare I say children, who are venturing into the world of esports, who are venturing into gaming, and they are literally living their dream. They are living the dream of making money off of playing video games competitively. And it's such an invaluable experience to be able to compete in these games and having that like shortened as well.
Yeah.
I'm just worried how it's going to dishearten them when it comes to their future.
Yeah, I think a thing for me with Rocket League as well, and something that we should speak about from a talent front, from a player front, from where it sits in the ecosystem, is that it's incredibly unique. It really does hold its own space if you think about it, because you look at Valorant, there'll be parallels that people will draw with CS or maybe other FPS games. How many games do you know where a car hits a fucking ball? How many do you know that are similar to that? There was one that was ever so slightly close called Roller Champions, and what happened to that? They just shot and killed it.
I never heard of it.
I did one event for it with Jacob. I don't know if he's here. I appreciate the opportunity. It was good fun. It was a fun game, but the community was very small. The developer didn't support it enough. You know, there you go, right? But yeah, Rocket League, it appeals to a wide audience. There's no violence in it, so you will get those younger generations coming through and playing it. It captivates its own space. Maybe you're challenging...
There's crossplay.
Like, yeah, there is. I mean, maybe you're challenging FIFA, roughly, I suppose, kind of, if you even want to say, like, different shit, same ball game kind of vibe or something like that. But no, to be honest, that then impacts the talent quite a lot, because if you're not able to pursue an opportunity as an analyst or a coach, I know people such as Gregan, for example, has now moved into coaching more when he used to be on the talent front. He's done a bit of both, but that's one of the options that you have open. You've then got to consider sort of what is it that I can do, because your skill set maybe isn't going to be as transferable, I suppose. You have to learn a completely different game, but you know, some parts are similar. I can see you sort of waiting to jump in, Pavlos.
Yeah, I feel like there have been a lot of arguments for a lot of the changes. There have been a bunch of changes in the Rocket League, and I think everybody was taken aback by it. It's been quite shocking. I think one of the more shocking ones was actually the prize pool change, not only in their majors and their big events, it was also the distribution for all the qualifiers and some of the smaller events, which to give you the basis for it for people that aren't in the know of how it all transpired. Basically, they took, first of all, they lessened the prize pool, so there's less money involved. But not only did they do that, the distribution of it was more spread out. So the people winning the event got less, and the people further down the line, the lower you went in your placings, you get some sort of a prize pool, some sort of a chunk of it. But we're not talking about much. We're talking about 300 euros here, 500 euros. But split it between the 2-3 players, that's nothing. So I feel like on the one hand, the people that actually make it to the top end of the events aren't really reaping the benefits of it. And the people at the bottom, they just get a consolidation prize, which, okay, cool, I got pocket money for this weekend when I eat lunch or something. Yeah,
I think...
You get the more expensive meal deal. You know how there's like the cheap one, and then you can get a salmon sandwich if you pay like £2 extra? Yeah, that's one of them.
I don't even like salmon. Foil. What is on with people liking salmon? I think
salmon cream cheese sandwich just slaps. It goes so hard.
Not in this economy, and which obviously, like with the economic state that we are currently in, I don't think anyone is like completely unaware to how it's currently sitting. Like, of course, there are going to be budget cuts, and unfortunately, we need to kind of take the punch to the face, I guess. A very, very, very big example of that being the recent Riot layoffs. I'm going to talk about this more from an employee perspective. For those of you who are new or don't know me, I have worked in tech consulting for the last 2 years, and I have gone through a basically similar identical process. Now, I am under NDA, so I can't like disclose what the process was like, but I can talk about it more from like a personal and a like emotional perspective, I guess. So these layoffs have been happening for the last year, not just throughout esports, but throughout tech. I think if anything, tech the technology industry was genuinely the first one that was hit, and it was big. It was Google, it was Amazon, it was tech in terms of consulting, it was Microsoft. It was huge. It was really, really bad. And reason for this being is that during COVID, Netflix as well was really heavily affected. I remember that. During COVID, what happened was that everybody was at home, and everybody was, as a result, using the internet. Everybody was using anything that was tech related, whether it's online shopping, whether it's subscription services, whether it's deliveries, whether it's using consultants that are specialized in tech to build the back end technology needed to be able to translate from the physical world to the online world. And there was so much money being made in the tech industry that they really, 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 really needed a humongous workforce. Like, I am talking about the predictions for the team that I was working in. When I was hired right off the back of COVID. That team had grown from 2 people to 150 people in 2 years, with the prediction of it growing to 500 people in the upcoming 3 years. So I was one of the third wave of hires where they hired 200 of us, and we're like, okay, we're now at 350 people. We still need 150 more by the end of 2024. And that was the prediction of how our team was growing. And that was not just my team. That was any team in any company that was in any way, shape, or form related to technology. Because there was so much money coming in that there were not enough people to keep up with the demand. But then COVID stops. And people are sick and tired of sitting at home in lockdown, using delivery services. Can't relate. I'm a gamer. And just not being outside. So the complete opposite, a complete different shift. People cancel their subscription services because they want to go out to the park. People stop ordering deliveries because they can finally go to a store and try on the clothes. People stop ordering shit online because they can just go to the grocery store. People no longer need consultants to build it, or anyone with technological capability to build the back end of a business, because it is no longer needed. So what happens? The demand drops. But all of a sudden, in a very quick way, and not in a structured way, which makes it so difficult for these companies to actually keep making money, because nobody really wants their services anymore because they're not needed, because COVID is done and out. And at the end of the day, you're not making money. You have had such a huge wave of influx, on top of the fact that everybody and their grandmother had studied something technology related in university, because everybody was realizing that that's where money was being made. So the supply far exceeded the demand. And that has, in time and time again, forced these companies to shut down, especially with the current economic downturn. Nobody's buying anything. Like, why would a company, like, most people cancel their subscription services. Like, that's the first thing that goes when you need to save money.
Yeah.
So it makes it really difficult to keep people on full time. And I'm not saying that it's right, but unfortunately it is part of life. It's part of the economic cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think this is what's happening? Sorry, Hazza, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go ask the question.
Do you think this is what is happening with Riot though? Because I feel like we're tying this in with Riot Games and the layoffs that was announced last night or this morning, depending where you are in the world. I feel like it's a hit in the gaming industry, but also the esports industry, right? Yep. Is that there aren't necessarily subscription-based products apart from cosmetics, which aren't really subscription-based? Never mind, maybe battle passes and stuff. But yeah, do you think this is what is happening with Riot as well?
So the financial situation of Riot, like, I don't think anyone can really speak to them, because I'm not sure if people are aware, but they are not, like, it's not Riot, it's Tencent. So you'd have to go to Tencent and you'd have to see Tencent holding, and they've see how their stock is doing, and that's not going to tell you much because they have a lot of different games. So it's like you're never really going to be able to get into the nitty-gritty of the finances unless, like, somehow you get your hands on a financial report, which, like, how would you do that? But when it comes to, like, gaming, yo, that's illegal, brother. Like, whoa, go down. But it's also, like, you said it yourself, like, skins. Like, I am not entirely sure, like, I'm not 100% aware of how Riot makes a majority of its money, but I do assume that in-game purchases are a big thing. If it's a recession and your family, for example, in the UK, this is becoming super, super common. You have to choose between turning on the heater or cooking your dinner. You're not going to spend an extra £5 to get your child a skin. Like, that's just not going to work, right? So skins are, in-game purchases are a luxury. Like, people forget that, like, they are a luxury. It is something that, you know, you get because you have the money to dispose that income. And with the world, again, completely opening up, are you going to spend £5 on a skin or £5 to go on coffee with your friends? Because you can finally see them after being home for 3 years. And that's the economics of it. that's not touching upon the emotional part of it. That's not touching upon like how everything else is changing. I know Hazza would rather spend that money on a skin than actually go out with friends because it's Hazza. But you're a minority there. So the emotional part of it is, it's a roller coaster. It is really, really rough to deal with, not just in terms of the person being let go, but also the guilt of the people who stay behind because they were the lucky ones. So this is, for companies, restructuring is always seen as the biggest test to the culture's sustainability within a company. And I think the next the next 6 to 12 months within Riot are going to be really, really, really crucial on how it's going to be handled internally from a management perspective, because survivors' guilt and remorse is 100% real. Like, that's obviously going to happen. Anger is a part of that. Just in general, feeling absolutely helpless and useless is a part of that. These people that are left behind need to be looked after emotionally, but then also the people that have been let go, their severance package is like actually the best one that I have ever heard of. Like, from working in tech, no one has ever gotten a severance package this good. Like, this is insane. But that doesn't justify the fact that they kind of found out about it like immediately. We had a 3-month warning. We did not get 6 months severance pay, but we had a 3-month warning. And that kind of like softens the blow a little bit. So
helps you prepare.
It does, but also it doesn't, because I will be completely honest, when I was told that there was going to be restructuring happening and that my role was at risk, like, I lost every single ounce of motivation to do my work. I was just logging into my computer and just like mindlessly doing my work, and I wasn't giving it my all, and it really, really like messed with me mentally. So I understand, like, you can either, like, you rip off the Band-Aid. I wanted them to rip off the Band-Aid, but I also wouldn't have wanted to be ripped off within like 2 hours. If that makes sense. Because your entire world just like flips upside down. Especially if you're someone who's like dependent on work for a visa. That's rough. That is really, really rough, because unfortunately visas are a thing. So looking at this from more of like the human resources and the management and the emotional perspective, this is an astronomical shift, and this is really, really like, restructuring is what makes or breaks companies. M&A makes a lot of money and is like a big part for a reason, because when you are putting companies together or tearing them apart, you need people that can handle these emotions of those who are left behind, but also who can handle the people that have left and set those people up for success as well. Because I don't know if you guys have been on TikTok, but like, people are angry. And I'm not talking about people who worked with Riot. I'm talking about like just community members, because they're sad, they're angry, they're hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are loads of things that I want to talk about with this one. So, first of all, it's like that greater industry problem, right? And how layoffs are going, and how you brought us into the topic, Ginny. And a conversation that we had the other day when we were speaking about all of this, and before we even knew that the layoffs were happening, is that the thing with this industry is nobody plays a safe bet anymore. There are no smaller scale games. All of the big companies that are making AAAs now, it's a 5-10 year plan. And if it goes down the pan, then they're all absolutely fucked. They are not thinking about backups. That's quite simply what it looks like. Riot, a little bit different. They want to focus on the high end still, and you can see that. That's what they put in the statement. It's supposed to be high quality deliverables, and that is, directly tied to products which are esports. I saw an interesting tweet from Harry, Doctor, Leaguecaster the other day, talking about like Legends of Runeterra, for example. It was a free-to-play card game, argued by him as being one of the best on the market, but there wasn't really too much monetization around it, right? Not any ways for people to actually spend money and for there to be that return on revenue, I suppose. Yeah, a bit of an interesting one with that, and like the changes being made there. And then another tweet which I've just added to the document, and I don't know if Singer can whip it up, is just like looking at some of the specific roles that have been hit, and some people who I was lucky enough to work with during my time sort of working through this industry, and wondering where that puts Riot's head in terms of like what the ecosystem looks like now. Because there are some really key ones in here, and ones which we spoke about as well. You know, people such as like Ashley Washington, for example, and how crucial she was as being a product lead for Game Changers in EMEA, and such a flagpole figure which people could go to and have their questions answered about, you know, what they were shaping up, what the plans look like for the future. And it can't help but make you feel just a little bit worried about what exactly it is that is going on here.
I mean, it's hard to really tell. Like Ginny said earlier, it's because we don't have an idea of what's going on with the economics of Riot Games and Tencent and whatnot. But it feels like something might have happened suddenly for them, or it might have been something in the making, and they've kept it behind closed doors.
I mean,
for
honestly,
for XY reasons, but this is such a rapid change that you've got to think there's something going on that we don't know of, and they need to fix it ASAP. Because if they wanted to take it slowly, they would. They could easily say, okay, instead of you guys getting a severance package for 6 months being paid, why don't we just keep you on for 3 months so to slowly, you know, transition? Because remember, the people left behind have to pick up the pieces. It's not only mentally draining for them, but also physically, because now they need to pick up what the others have left behind them without having them around to do that transition, to pick up what has been left. So I feel it's a little bit of a rough one in that way, and for them to be called, for Riot to be needing to make such a quick change out of nowhere, I feel like there's something going on.
It's difficult. There's like no good way to do it either, because if you say to someone, oh, your job is going to be gone in 6 months, how does that then make them feel about the work that they have to do for the next 6 months? Are you going to be really enthused about carrying on and keeping on what it is that you're doing, or are you constantly having this thought in the back of your mind that ultimately it doesn't matter too much because I'm going to have to move on regardless? I don't know. Something else to mention as well for everyone watching: if you do take a look at that thread, make sure you go and give as much support to the people who have been affected as possible, because obviously it's easy to talk about layoffs and all the esports winter and this and that and the doom and gloom and try and make light of it, but these are real people whose lives have been affected. So make sure to, you know, give them the love that they deserve, because I mean, it's easy to say, but none of these guys deserve to be out of work with what they've, you know, given to us over the time that we've had.
Absolutely. I want to touch upon both of your points where you kind of like mentioned that this is it seems like a hasty and a quick decision. As someone whose like entire job was unfortunately building the systems that allow restructuring, this is not something that's like done overnight. Like I would be shook if this is done overnight. Like when we work on building the process for a restructuring, it takes us anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. When I joined the company, we were already working on a restructuring project for a big international pharmaceutical company. And when I left 2 years later, they were still working on that restructuring project, because that pharmaceutical company had like 500 to 600 plus offices worldwide. A little bit of a bigger scale, but again, pretty crazy. I worked on restructuring for a broadcast company specifically, worldwide as well. That took us 6 months. So I wouldn't be surprised if this would have been in the making for months. It was just potentially something that I would assume, maybe I could be wrong here, that Riot thought, actually, we might not need this. We could save these jobs. We could save these people. We don't need to cut the cost here. And maybe something along the way made them realize that actually, unfortunately, no matter how hard they're going to try, there is no way for them to save the cost. There is no way for them to keep the people on, and they're going to have to let go. Restructuring is always going to be really painful, really emotional, and really hard to go through. And giving people a 6-month notice of them losing their job is very, very, very unrealistic, because, as you said, it has that thought as an employee in the back of your mind that what you're doing right now is not going to work. It's not worth it. It's hopeless. You're gone. You're like, it's rough. But also having like, I don't know if you guys seen some of the tweets on Twitter, but it's like people logged off of producing the final day of week 2 of the LEC. And the next morning they wake up and they're like, oh, time to log into work. And it's like, oh. And that is really hard.
It's crazy.
That's shocking.
But that is like, I know you're going to say that like, that's shocking, that's really hard, but
that's trauma-inducing.
But that is how every single tech layoff had gone in the last year. I'm talking Google, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, well, Meta specifically, Spotify, every single one of these layoffs was genuinely, and I shit you not, people opening their laptop and realizing that they have lost access to their laptop. They could not log into their laptops, and then getting an email on their personal account saying, "Hi, you have an HR meeting in like X amount of hours." So maybe for people who haven't worked in tech, this is like, whoa, this is insane. But unfortunately, this is like way more common than you think, and a very heavy emphasis on unfortunately. Because for me right now, the people being laid off, like 530 people is a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about, because it's not like a company of like hundreds of thousands of employees. Like, you have to keep into consideration that Riot already had pretty tight teams. Like, the teams are really small. And 530 people probably means that to an extent, every single team within the company has been affected in some way, shape, or form. And the way that that is going to rip apart the culture of this company, it could make or break it. And most of the time for a lot of firms, it breaks the company, because culture and the people there is what makes it thrive, especially when we're looking at an industry like esports. Because I mean, Pavlos, you've done a whole dedicated video to this, where for esports, like, people genuinely will work 12-hour days, 7 days a week for esports, because they have that bigger goal, they have that bigger picture, they have that bigger sense of belonging, sense of community. But with this happening, for these people who have been working these extreme, I'm not saying that these are the hours that people work at Riot, I cannot attest to that because I've never worked for them, but people seeing these layoffs within other parts of esports are going to be like, well, is it worth it? You know? And then how is that going to affect the industry?
Yeah. I think one thing, Ginny tweeting mid-broadcast, I see you. And secondly, so I think the thing I want to lean into more with this, and you know what the title is and sort of where we're heading with this, is what does this mean for Riot? You said that the next sort of like 6 months, year, whatever, are going to be crucial to how the company is operating. What they said and what their mantra is this is going to allow them to sort of maintain the quality and focus more on these big events. How do you think exactly that that's going to work? Can either of you sort of give an idea of where you see this going? What you know, if there's going to be any big differences in any of that? Because, you know, we've got people here saying that every single department has been hit. How does that workload share itself? Is there the potential for new people to sort of be coming in amongst these layoffs, or is it quite simply we are trying to move people out rather than, you know, is what I'm trying to say?
Could be a combination of both.
Is it like 3 people leave, 1 person comes in kind of thing, or, you know, how exactly is this going to work?
The thing is, like, you can't go through a mass layoff and then immediately go and advertise for new jobs. Like,
No.
that is going to be the most like spitting on your employee's face thing ever, and that is generally going to destroy the people who have been left behind to an extent that is irreplaceable. Usually what people do when it comes to these layoffs is they look at the company, they look at what they have, they look at the roles that they have open, and then they look at who can they slot into roles that they have open that they need, and who are disposable to the extent where you can share their responsibilities between like other people. So these 530 people being left off, like, that's it. Like, these people unfortunately they're going to have a severance package. They're going to be able, they have support looking for careers. Like, Riot is helping them find other careers. So by no means was this like a cheap thing, because having, like, paying people 6 months of their salary, helping them find another career, giving them support in every way, shape, and form that is possible is not going to be like, that's a hefty price tag attached to it. So they're not going to go wake up and be like, oh, we fired 530 people, let's go hire like 200 more people. That's just not going to work. I'm assuming they're going to share responsibilities, but my worry is a lot of the people who work for Riot, and I'm not going to be able to say like names openly, but a lot of the people who have worked for Riot were people who have had years and years and years and years and years of experience in this industry, brought a lot of experience from other industries into it, and have been able to break milestones that have never been broken before. Them being gone, there is not going to potentially be anyone who can, like, there's going to be someone who can do that role, but can they do the role to that extent? And we're only going to be able to see how that's going to play out with the next few weeks of broadcasts, with the first international events. And I'm sure there is a plan in place, and I'm sure there are resources in place to be able to deal with this. But
Yeah.
I would be lying if I said I'm not a little worried.
Yeah, I mean, there are no replacements for that kind of experience, right? Like, there is nothing that you can do to replace time. Time is the ever sort of the mystical power behind everything, and you know, you can only have as much time as you have lived. I'm trying to I don't know here, right? I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely am. It's a difficult one for sure. I totally forgot what I was going to mention. I had something in my mind. But
yeah, I think something I was going to say, and maybe this will lean you back into your point after my tomfoolery, is that it's a lot of like good actors as well that have that much experience. Like, you don't sit in a role for that long without being good at what it is that you do 9 times out of 10. You know, sure, there are examples in this industry of people who hang around like Deadwood that you know, like are malignant.
Whoa, why are you
in
calling
those
Pavlos
positions.
objecting?
No,
Whoa.
But you know what I mean, right? Like, there are some people that will stay in executive positions and you know, be predatory, whereas the inverse of that is you have people that are around in these positions for a long time, like a lot of people who have been lost as a result of these layoffs, that are positive figures within that space. And one of the examples I saw, I think, and maybe Ginny, you will know them, is Jian, if I'm not mistaken, from LEC, like the person with the who helps coordinate interviews and stuff. And I saw so many people saying about how they were a really positive face when they first went into the media room and how daunting a place like that can look. You know, people like that who keep things going, and that you're only ever sadly gonna hear about when something terrible like this happens, because they are you know, one of the cogs in the machine which are underappreciated.
Yeah,
We can only speculate on what the direction Riot wants to take this, what these decisions and what Riot essentially wants to lead to. But I think, I don't know, I'm just speculating here. Maybe it ties into the whole 2025 is where things start to roll properly. When it comes to certain esports leagues, I've heard that being said within Riot. When it comes to the tier 2 system, when it comes to the rollout of some new games and how Riot want to function as a company and within the esports scene, obviously because I'm more involved in the esports scene, I would have heard that more mostly. But I feel like maybe they've done this in order for them to be able to rebound in time for 2025. I feel like now they've got 10 months to do that, potentially. This could be some sort of thought behind this.
I mean, there's always going to be a thought behind this. Like, Riot, the way that Riot was started and the success that Riot found as like the history was not because these two guys were like some computer science genius nerds that made a good game. They were business majors, literally business majors that were like, oh, actually, if we make a free-to-play game and we sell skins, we can make money. And everybody was like, you guys are stupid. Nobody's going to play your game. And then they were like, watch and see and watch and see. So management-wise, innovation-wise, whatever, they have access to the best of the best, and they are probably some of the best of the best. So it's just a matter of seeing how this is going to play out. But my heart goes out to every single person at Riot, not just the people that have lost their jobs, but also the people that are staying behind, and then on Monday you have to go into the office, and then you walk into your office and then you realize that there are a lot of empty desks. Like, that's not an easy feeling, and that is really, really difficult as well. So I hope everybody lands on their feet. I know everybody will. People that work at Riot are some of the most talented, dedicated, hardworking people there. They will land on their feet. They will find a good job. They will find meaning again. There is life, you know, after Riot, as it's said quite often in the industry. And I know that they can do it. They're smart people. It's just an unfortunate situation that we're currently in. And every, you know, after, you know, rain comes sunshine, and then you get a rainbow. I hope.
Oh my god. Touching.
Well put.
Yeah, there is. I can't. It's exactly what you said. There's another way to say it. I can't remember how exactly it goes, but facts. Yeah, I mean, again, like it's that experience thing. You know how people will always joke about jobs where it's like, oh, you need this much experience on a role that has only existed for X amount of time. There'll be plenty of people with that necessary experience now that will hopefully have somewhere to go. But the whole situation is shitty. And you can only hope for the best.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and the best will happen. You know, everything happens for a reason. I'm a really strong believer of that, and I want to thank you both for joining us today for the podcast. I mean,
no rain, no flowers. That's the one.
Hey, ooh, okay, I like that. No rain, no flowers.
There you
Okay, you know, you're like that's a cute one. So thank you, Singa, as well, for producing this week's show. Thank you to everybody in the chat who has joined us and has contributed to the discussion. All we can really do right now is stay strong and just be kind to one another. If you see a position or you hear of a position, feel free to tweet about it. You know, send it around to those who have been affected. This is like really where, as a community, we need to come together and try and help as many people as we possibly can. And I know we can do it. So take care of yourselves, guys, and please stay strong and check in on your friends. Okay, like you never know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.